Well, hello and welcome to another episode of More Perfect Marketing, the live stream edition. I'm here with my colleagues AJ Saunders and Ken Cook, and today we're going to be talking about, well, let me put it this way. Several years ago, I was in some marketing event, and I heard this guy get up at the front of the room and start talking about this concept of spray and pray marketing. And I thought, well, that's an interesting and alliterative phrase. And in recent weeks, we've been talking with one of our clients about this phrase he uses: random acts of marketing. And back when I started working with Ken Cook, the guy with the cowboy hat here, he used a phrase: throwing spaghetti at the wall. And all of these things describe what I think as marketers we see so many businesses doing. And we're going to talk a little bit today about what that problem actually is and what the results of approaching marketing that way looks like, and how to fix it, what to systematically do to get out of that routine. All right, I think that's a good basis for a discussion. Ken, you've been talking about throwing spaghetti at the wall for years and why that's a problem. And maybe you want to take a moment to sort of talk a little bit about what you've seen businesses doing, what that actually looks like out there, and why it's so problematic.
I saw a post on Facebook yesterday that I responded to. The fellow is a local plumber. He said, well, I set up my Google AdWords, and the next week when I checked back in, it had spent $7,000 on keywords like, how do I get a nice ass?
I really want to know what that was supposed to be.
And he called Google and he said, guys, this isn't right. You've spent a ton of my money on things that have nothing to do with plumbing. And they said, well, we're sorry about that. That's just the way things go. And here he is, a local guy trying to grow his business out $7,000 with 0 new customers. The problem with throwing spaghetti against the wall, the problem with spray and pray marketing, the problem with not having a great plan to go to market is that you will waste tremendous amounts of money. That's the problem. Mm-hmm. And the thing that most small businesses can't afford to do is waste tremendous amounts of money. I'm going to tell one more quick story. We did an assessment, you and I, for a very large company. They were probably low 9 figures. And this low 9-figure company had let go of their internal AdWords manager, and they just wanted to see what was going on. AdWords is a really easy example for me, apparently, this morning. And so I walked in and I looked around and I kicked the tires a little bit. They were spending $50,000 a week. And I estimated that over the course of the last year since they let this kid go, they had probably made back $2,400 on the $50,000 a week they had been spending. And the director of marketing said, okay. We should probably fix that. A large business can take a $50,000 a week loss. I'll let you do the math on that. And you're using that new Stream Deck. I love it. And they can take that $50,000 loss a week and they can just eat it and they're okay. But if you and I were to lose $50,000 in a week, we would definitely not be okay.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Small business cannot afford the waste that large business can. And so the reason that I am obsessive about the eradication of waste and the perspective of saying plan, don't mess up, don't waste, is because that waste for a small business owner is a difference in quality of life. right? I had an old boss, Nick Galanti was his name, and he was one of the first guys I worked for within a marketing firm. And he said to me, Ken, you need to realize that what you're asking people to do in most cases is forego a family vacation so that they can have a better one in a few months. That's what we're asking in many cases. And that's the kind of investment that small business owners make is they say, hey, I'm not going to buy a new car. I'm going to do this ad campaign. Hey, I'm not going to buy a boat. I'm not going to go to Disneyland with my kids. I'm doing this instead. And you know what? It kind of breaks my heart. The idea of saying, hey, rather than go to Disneyland with my kids, I spent all these dollars on marketing and I got nothing to show for it.
You've been giving examples of the type of business that you and I have worked with most of our careers, businesses that typically exist in the offline world. I've worked with a lot of performing arts and wineries and financial advisors and those types of things that are in the physical world. And, they are often presented with so many different options by the folks who are selling marketing opportunities or marketing channels, right? So the local radio station, the newspaper, right? But it's surely got to be, and AJ, I'm setting you up for a question here.
Good.
So much easier, so much more streamlined when the business is entirely in existence online, particularly like an e-commerce store, right? Even those stores that don't even have inventory, right? All they do is they drop ship, right? So it's a Shopify store. They're sitting around waiting for an order to come in. When the order comes in, then they actually purchase the thing to fulfill it, and it's like that's got to be a dream business. These guys in this business model, they surely can't be in the trap that Ken's just outlined, can they?
Softball question time. All right, thanks, David. So, I don't differentiate between being online and not being and being an offline business. So I see marketing as this holistic pursuit of generating more customers, generating different customers, right? And so I think, if we look at social media, for example, I believe there are 160 major platforms when it comes to social media, right? Just to name a few, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Reddit, Pinterest, right? That's just five off the top of my head. And therefore, where do you spend your ad dollars, your ad pounds, your ad euros across those things? And I think oftentimes what I've seen, and the name I have it is Bill Down the Pub's nephew's daughter's boyfriend's mother, says that she's big on TikTok and she's selling crafting stuff. So therefore, your welding business must get on TikTok because surely your ICP, your idol client profile, is on TikTok. And I remember me and Ken talked about this about a year ago, actually. Somebody put everybody should be on TikTok, and I put no, they shouldn't be. This was on LinkedIn, and his response to me was, "Well, you lack imagination." And I'm happy with that label. I'm happy with that label because, to me, strategic marketing, whether you're a small business, a medium-sized business, or an S&P 500 business, is the fact that you have to be accountable for every dollar, every pound, every euro you spend, and it has to be justifiable how you spend that. And you can't just walk away and say, "Well, we spent a bit of money and we kind of don't know," right? And so for me, it's the necessity to say we have all these different channels up there. Where's the opportunity in terms of the noise to client ratio, right?
Mm-hmm.
Versus where is the ability for us to actually get some traction. I can give you two very, very quick stories.
Sure.
So, number one, I had a friend of mine approached me in February. They run it's him and his wife. They run a plus size clothing brand. I tell this story all the time because it's a great story. And I said to them, you should try getting onto Twitch, right? And Twitch, if you don't know, is a streaming platform where there's lots of gamers, there's lots of people doing streaming their lives, right? It's a very, very interesting platform, but it gives you the ability to just tell long form stories in a way that you get drowned out on Meta. And also on Meta, if people see that you're selling plus size clothing, they're going to go, well, how is this any different from the other 12 clothing ads that I've seen? Because their attention span is so short and so immediate that you can't differentiate yourself quick enough by the time they scroll down. And therefore, my whole thing was, you may have lots of clients, or the potential clients would be on Facebook, but your route to market to get traction, to be able to do Facebook properly with a right budget, is to get some early traction on Twitch, on Reddit, on King.com, which is another micro kind of streaming platform, those sorts of things.
Yep.
Because it doesn't really matter, right?
So I want to hear the other story, and then I want to talk a little bit about what was going on in your head as you were working through this. Because in the remaining time, I really want to focus on, like, how do you think through the process? What are the things that you're considering? You've already given us a glimpse of that. We'll dig into that a little bit more in a moment. Sure. But what's the other story quickly?
Well, so the other thing that comes to mind is Zappos, right? Zappos made a strategic decision in the beginning to focus just on resourcing the customer service agents to be effective and to be ambivalent to KPIs, time management, etc. Because they knew that to win the battle of selling shoes online, they just said to their customer service reps, take as long as you need. You have ability to process refunds up to $100. Somebody calls you and says it wasn't right and they want to do exchange, process it, etc. They scaled to being $1 billion company by just having by putting all their marketing budget into CX, which should blow your mind.
Customer experience, customer
service.
So, okay, there were a bunch of little things that were sort of in the subtext of everything that you shared, and
sure.
And I want to throw this back to Ken to talk a little bit about kind of the types of things that we need to consider in order to organize this chaos, and then figure out how do you prioritize. And you brought up things like attention span of the audience, and where there's best opportunity to build relationship, and where there is, something beyond the initial ad to connect with the customer and actually develop an ongoing reputation and position in the marketplace as being a great customer service focused business, and what that does to the long-term relationship and long-term revenue, right? Those are just 3 examples of many things that can be considered. So how do you actually organize all of this and then find a better solution than spaghetti and spray and pray and all of the other kind of ill-informed or uninformed approaches that businesses are taking? So I'm going to throw that back to you, Ken.
So I think there's a couple of things. One, you've got to start off from a customer-centric perspective. Now, this sounds a little crazy, but walk with me here. If I knew everything about my customer, let's just pretend that you walked into work today and you knew everything about your customer. Okay? What would that enable you to do differently? Well, I think there's a few big things and a lot of small things, but the biggest thing would be you would be able to look out over the landscape that is your kingdom and say, where are people huddled together in bunches like grapes? I'll give you a quick example. AJ, you mentioned Pinterest. Pinterest has the largest population of gay men of any social network. Okay? If that's who you want to reach, well, we could start by saying the platform has a lot of these people. Right? And maybe if that's who we want to go after, that's where we're going to go. But it also has the largest population of upper middle class white women between 40 and 60. Well, if that's who I want to reach, that may be a great place to go as well. Right? And so understanding the demographics of where you're advertising, right? What you're advertising, why they should care, et cetera, and so forth. And there's a lot of things that we could go into there. But if you understand all of those pieces, it's really easy to say, well, rather than going after a target that's this big, I can go after a target that's this big. When my dad taught me to shoot, he repeated the often stated military phrase, aim small, miss small. Right? In other words, don't just say, well, I'm somewhere over there. Know exactly where you're aiming for. And when you know exactly where you're aiming for, you're not going to necessarily be as accurate all the time, but you're more likely to be more accurate.
Hey, Ken, you mentioned Pinterest, and I want to jump in here, and I know you're going to get to this point eventually, but one of the things that I learned about Pinterest several years ago, and it actually, I think, is still the case, is the nature of the people who are there are more likely to click, and that click is resulting in a purchase than clicks from other platforms. And so there's something about behavior of people on certain platforms based on kind of where they are in market as a potential buyer. That's also a consideration.
Absolutely. And I mean that's the whole thing here, right? Is if we're thinking about people, we're asking ourselves, how do people work? I kind of think it's a little bit funny. I majored in psychology and philosophy in college, double majored. And psychology and philosophy are much the same thing, right? And especially when you get into the history of them, they're exactly the same thing. And marketing is really,
that's a different podcast and different episode. But
my point is, what we're doing.
That's a whole series. That's a whole series.
We're really dealing with how do people work, and I think a lot of times what happens, what I see is there is this flattening of humanity that says, well, people work like this, is they want to do something and they do it. That's just not true. And so I think we have to ask ourselves, how do real people work, and how do I really influence real people? And I'll give one last example, and then I'll let AJ chime in, shall we say. Have you ever gone to a Blazers game, David, where they score 100 points?
I have been to a Blazers game, and they did not score 100 points.
And so it used to be, when I was young, that if they scored 100 points, you got a coupon for a free chalupa at Taco Bell. Now, how many people went to the Blazers game thinking to themselves, I'm going to eat Taco Bell later tonight? Probably not very many. However, I remember this clear as day. I'm at a Blazers game. There is less than like a minute left, and the Blazers have 99 points, and the crowd spontaneously starts chanting chalupa. I kid you not.
Okay.
And here's the thing. How many people, because they ended up scoring 101 points, got their free coupon, went to a Taco Bell when that wasn't what they were planning on doing? We are influenced by so many things around us. And it's not just, well, I put an ad out there, they clicked the ad, they bought because they liked it. It's not that. There's so much more going on. And so I think that when I say we have to be customer centric, I'm asking, how do I climb inside someone else's head, figure out what their life and their world is like, and then create a set of circumstances that allows them to engage with me? That's what I'm trying to do.
I just want to throw something out there, because that's a great story, and somebody who's listening or watching is going to say, "Oh, I'm gonna find a way to emulate that in my business right away." And I think that here's the problem. It's very similar to, I forget who it was, Bob down the pub's cousin's, nephew's, aunt's college roommate, right? That is not necessarily relevant without a lot of research and intentional positioning, and one of my favorite words, having control over as much of what the prospect customer does as possible. And in that case, like that's not a place that most businesses can go.
No.
It's the iceberg effect, isn't it? You know, people. Sorry, Ken. You know, I call this the iceberg effect. You know, I see people who have followed somebody for for 3 months who's been posting on Instagram every day for 3 years, and over those 3 years they've iterated, they've figured out what works for their audience, what doesn't work, and then they release a course that says, in 30 days time you can be doing this, and somebody buys that course and goes on and goes, well, it didn't work, and it didn't work because you haven't understood the paradigm, right, of the paradigm and the economical situation that that person has created over those 3 years. And therefore, of course, you're not going to get the result because you're essentially going, well, it's an iceberg, stupid, aren't you? But you're only seeing that little layer above the sea level. You're not
Yep.
seeing all that disappointment, all that trial and error that's below, all that foundational building. And so for me, it is, you're absolutely right, and this is why I kind of took it into a joke. Bob's down the pub's sisters, brothers, whoever, right? It's the context and it's the content of the paradigm that you're in, you know. And the other thing that I would say on the situation is, I remember 10 years ago when Uber was massive and was skyrocketing, right? And everyone was like, "We want to be the next Uber," and they were trying to operate in a climate that was so desperate to their macroeconomic climate, i.e., they were a small business that had people to feed, needed to make a profit, versus say some billion-dollar corp who had VC funding, had equity on tap essentially, right, and had infinite resources, and they were trying to think small and play big rather than thinking big and playing small.
Mhm.
I think that kind of dovetails nicely into what Ken was saying about shooting small, right?
There is something to be said for well, you talked about sort of the context of
Yeah.
applying something to a business, and I think one of the things that we all fight against is the fact that it's not just businesses that have this lack of understanding of how to approach, building their marketing, identifying the right channels, identifying the right messaging, understanding who their customers, etc. But as you just pointed out, and you were talking about it in terms of like a content creator who is selling a course on how they create and get following from content, but Main Street marketers are culprits here, often just unknowingly, ignorantly,
Yep.
right? Because of a completely different issue that we'll talk about in a different episode, Ken. Which is that they are
Coming soon.
very, very narrow in their understanding of marketing, but maybe really, really deep in their understanding of how a particular platform and its mechanics work. And that's a problem when it comes to them being a good guide or advisor to clients, is that they have a limitation in what they're actually capable of doing.
And I call it the hammer situation, right? Just to interrupt you, just to give an analogy. If all you have in your toolkit is a hammer, every problem that you face must result in a whack of it, right?
Mhm.
Whereas if you look underneath the car, you'll suddenly realize that sometimes it is you need a hammer, other times you'll need a wrench, other times you may need a new part, other times you may need to weld something on, right? And so therefore I call that, well, for me it's mis-selling, right? Fundamentally, because sometimes actually you don't need a whack, you need a wrench. But if your sphere of understanding is, well, I have this big old hammer, everything seems foreign, and therefore everything is outside the bounds of what you're competent and capable of.
Mhm. It's a shame that more business owners don't have clarity around like what the point that you just made, and what's even worse, they don't have clarity on like what's the path to establish a better direction or a more thoughtful plan.
Yep.
And if only something that, I don't know, came in under 100 pages really walked them through the entire process. Wow, that was you picked up on that, Ken. Nice, love it. That's exactly what we put together. And
Yes.
and Ken, you want to sort of share what what you're giving for the viewers, not the listeners, on the little Vanna White show that you were doing there. What are you showing off, and where?
This is a copy of the Prepared Marketing System, written by the three of us. And what it does is it's going to walk you through soup to nuts in a very, very easy to digest format, how to build a marketing system that will create profitability and long-term sustainability for your small business. You can go to thepreparedgroup.com/book. It is thepreparedgroup.com/book. You can grab a free copy there. You can also find it on Amazon if you'd like a physical copy. And we would love to have a chat about what you think of the ideas in it.
Brilliant. All right. Well, it's that time for us to wrap up. Thanks for the visual. The book in my hands, it looks a lot larger, but you are a. Hey, by the way, Ken, AJ knows a big and tall store that you might. I'll send you the link over to the Twitch broadcast so you can check it out. Anyway, folks, this has been another episode of More Perfect Marketing, the live stream edition. Thanks for hanging out with us, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Take care.